Hello, and welcome to This Conversation Matters, a weekly show about the social issues shaping our communities, from race and inequality to justice, economic opportunity, and overall well-being. I'm Sheree R. Each week, I speak with experts and people with lived experience to help you better understand why these issues matter in our lives. Let's talk about how important it is for people to vote in general. There are still people who feel their voice doesn't matter.
I think it's incredibly important from that standpoint. Your city council members, your county commissioners, your state representatives, like those people are making decisions that have impacts on our everyday life. I don't even know how else to state it. I mean, as a citizen, as a person living in a certain community, you want to have some say in who those people are. And it's very easy to feel like my vote doesn't matter, or they're going to do what they want to do anyway.
So we are speaking with Andrea Jenkins, who served 8 years as city councilwoman for the city of Minneapolis, Ward 8. There are so many more questions I have for you.
What is your podcast called?
It's called This Conversation Matters.
Okay.
And that's the name of the show on 104.7. This is Georgia Fort's radio station, right?
Oh, cool.
So it airs on the station at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays.
I really like Georgia. I think she's doing a fantastic job. So, but at any rate, your show is called This Conversation Matters.
Yes, this Conversation Matters. And we look at the social issues going on in America. And that's very broad, right? That could be housing issues. It could be race-related issues. It can be economic disparities.
Call numbers 104.
104.7 FM. And this show airs at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays. But also I put it up on Spotify and YouTube a few days after the fact. So sometimes the same day, later at night. And I work about 2 to 3 weeks in advance. I have enough content to get me for 2-3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
You've been busy. All right. Well, let's dig in.
Okay. So welcome to This Conversation Matters. And today we have Andrea Jenkins, who served as councilwoman in Minneapolis for 8 years. And I'm curious, Andrea, let's start a little bit with how you got into politics. What led you to want to be councilwoman?
Hey, Sheree, how you doing? Thank you for the invitation. I actually worked as a policy aide for 2 different council members prior to seeking a public office myself. And so, I had a very, very, I guess you would call intimate relationship with the ward that I was hoping to represent, and it subsequently did represent. And, I had a lot of experience in helping to create policies for the principals that I worked for, the elected city council members that I worked for. And, in 2017, when I ran for office, the country had just elected to his first term, Donald Trump. And, I was really anxious that, nothing would be getting done at the federal level, which I was right. And certainly the state is doing their thing, but really where change happens is at the very local level. And so I wanted to be a part of that change. Some of the things that really drove me to wanting to be on the city council was the inequities that are present and continue to be present in our communities between African Americans and the broader community in Minneapolis, but even more so broadly in the Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota. I mean, almost every indicator of quality of life shows African Americans at almost half the rate of, white Americans or white Minnesotans, to be more specific, in our community, and wanting to be able to try to address some of those issues and concerns, um, and just more broadly serve my community, bringing more equity to certainly African Americans and people of color, but to the LGBT community and specifically the transgender community, which I am a part of. Also, I saw myself working on immigrant rights and disability rights. And so all of those things sort of propelled me to seek public office. It was an open seat. My predecessor had stepped down after 3 terms and really wanted to see a person of color, a woman of color, take that seat. And so when an open seat is available, you kind of have to go for it. It's really challenging to run against a
An incumbent.
incumbent, but when there's an open seat, there's a greater opportunity. And I actually got drafted to run for office, which is kind of interesting. There was a Facebook page that was created called Run, Andrea Run.
Okay.
Uh, and this was in 2017. And there was so much interaction, so many likes um, on the Facebook page that it ended up crashing. And so that was a pretty good indicator that I had a lot of support out there. And the campaign, again, itself, we ended up winning that first race with about 78% of the vote, which was pretty remarkable.
Amazing. Yeah. And I'm going to ask too, because like during this time, because you mentioned like this again, this is around Donald Trump's first term. We were just seeing on a national level a rise in the number of women of color at the U.S. Senate level. But here locally in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, there still were not very many people of color, women of color, especially in the Minneapolis City Council. And that has changed a lot since then. And then as you mentioned, being transgender, so you were the first Black transgender person to also ever run, and then won the 2 terms.
That is true. As African American woman identified transgender person. But when I got elected, there was also another transgender man that got elected at the same time, Philippe Cunningham. So we served together. Technically, my election was called before his. His race didn't get decided until a few days later. They had to tally the votes. We use ranked choice voting in Minneapolis, and so they had to calculate all the votes and everything. And he did end up winning.
It's Ward 4.
Yeah, Ward 4.
You were Ward 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about those 2 districts in terms of, in case that gives us any insight. Ward 8 is also the district where more people will now know is the district where George Floyd was murdered.
Yeah. A historically African American community, one of the first areas of town where African Americans were able to purchase homes. And even, those early days, it was very controversial for African Americans to own homes in this community. But over time, it became really the center of middle class African American communities in Minneapolis. Now it's probably one of the more diverse areas of the city. It's located right in the middle of the city. The Ward 8 starts just south of Lake Street and goes all the way to 50th. And then from north to south, east to west, it goes from Lindale Avenue all the way over to Cedar Avenue. So lots of Latino families, lots of Somali families, African American families. It's still a predominantly white community because we are, in Minneapolis where the population is majority white, but the people of color, I mean, it's a pretty close balance, right? It's like, I would say 45% people of color and maybe 55% white. Lots of income um, variation from Kingfield neighborhood, which I would classify as middle to upper income white communities, to central neighborhood, which has some of the lowest income numbers in this ward. So lots of economic variation, lots of ethnicities, um, very much a single family, duplex, triplex kind of community. Not a whole lot of like, big, large apartment buildings, etc. Um, Homeowners, renters. It's a very beautiful ward. As you mentioned, we are now home to the murder of George Floyd and all that entails. But I'm really proud to have represented what was, like I said, probably one of the more historic Black communities in the Twin Cities.
Okay, thank you. And then also that year, that first year in 2017 when you were elected, you were one of 3 Black council people to win the election
Hmm.
that year. And I do know there had been a few in the past. And also for those people who don't know it, Minneapolis had a Black mayor um, um,
Hmm.
decades before, as well, a Black woman as mayor. Sharon.
Sharon Sells Belton,
Yes,
who
thank
are
you.
who also represented Ward 8,
Okay.
and was a very strong supporter of myself, and I consider not only Sharon as a mentor but as a dear friend. And she represented Ward 8. She was the city council president, um, as was I, and then subsequently she became mayor of the city. Prior to me joining the city council, I think there had been 5 other Black city council members on the Minneapolis City Council. And then myself and Philippe got elected, as well as, you said there were 3 African Americans now. Oh, Jeremiah Ellison.
Yeah.
And so we made it 8 African Americans that had been elected to the city council up to that point. Um, and now it's really interesting. We talk about, you mentioned that in 2017, they called that the year of the woman candidate, and Time Magazine
I,
did a whole spread
yeah, I was
and
going to bring that
cover.
up. Yes. Mm,
And I happened to make the cut and be on that cover.
yeah.
Um, and since my first election onto the Minneapolis City Council up until today, the Minneapolis City Council is a majority women run council.
Okay. And I know we're seeing that in other areas across the Twin Cities as well. Currently in St. Paul.
St. Paul, they had an all women city council for a while. And then I think one of the council members stepped down and was replaced by a male. So it's still majority female city council.
Yeah. What would you say is some of the shift at that time? Because again, to make Time magazine, this was not just about Minneapolis. This was nationwide that we were seeing a shift and more women at the local politics level, and also more LGBTQ candidates at that time.
Yeah.
Do you think it had anything to do with Trump's administration? Or what was maybe the change that was going on in the US to make that difference?
Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with the Trump administration. This is my personal opinion. And in fact, I think the Trump administration came into being because the country had really began to recognize some of the systemic challenges that really, I guess, defined America were, in fact, not helpful, and that women and people of color and LGBT people were being, elevated. I think it was sort of after, right after the Obama administration, where we had really turned this corner into like recognizing, I think, what some may call marginalized communities. Equity and inclusion were not just buzzwords, but was real actions being taken by corporations, by institutions, by colleges and universities to really create a more equitable society. And I think the election of Trump, and even that first term, was the backlash to that, right? So it wasn't necessarily, in my opinion, because of Trump. I think Trump rose up because of this um, shift in American values that was really moving us towards a more equal society.
Okay. And let me say, you mentioned President Barack Obama, who was an activist, in Chicago, as a senator in Chicago. You grew up in Chicago, and before I talk about that a little bit more, but you've also been listed before as having said that Barack Obama, Mayor Harold Washington, who was mayor of Chicago, and Jesse Jackson, who we know also lived in Chicago, as being part of the inspiration of why you also decided to go into politics. And I just look at those three men, again, being in Chicago, and that was also where you were raised. Was there any differences in terms of like Chicago politics and seeing, some of the early runs and some of the early successes, I'm going to say, for Black Americans coming out of Chicago, right? Jesse Jackson ran for president. He did not win,
Yeah.
obviously.
He made a very huge impression on the nation, I would say,
Yeah.
with that run. I'm so glad you brought up this question, Sheree, for a few reasons. But I absolutely was shaped by my upbringing in Chicago. And, I mentioned those three people, but just the political nature of growing up in Chicago, and not only electoral politics, which, Chicago is notoriously known for its rugged electoral politics, from Mayor Daley, Richard M. Daley, and then his son, I think his son was Richard
think they were both
Jay
Richard.
Daley.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and in between that was Harold Washington, which was the first black mayor, who is a beloved figure in Chicago politics. I was
Look
18
out.
years old and I worked on his campaign, passing out flyers. Like I wasn't a part of the strategic planning of the campaign, but I like hundreds and thousands of people, worked to get him elected. It's interesting, how in a lot of black households you'll see a photo of Jesus and maybe Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. In Chicago, you would see those three people plus a photo of Harold Washington in people's homes. He had that kind of impact.
Question, not to get too far off tangent from that,
Uh-huh.
but I would say before Harold Washington was mayor, just again for people who don't know, there was Mayor Jane Byrne, the first female mayor in
Yeah.
Chicago, who Harold Washington
Upended. Yeah.
defeated, right? Because they were running against each other. So it wasn't just like you said, like she was no longer running and he happened to, but that to me also said a lot about Chicago politics at that time to have had a female mayor and who was then succeeded by a black mayor.
Mm-hmm.
This was the early 1980s. Jane Byrne, late 1970s when she was elected. Mayor Washington in the early 80s.
80s. Yeah.
And I grew up in
80.
Chicago, so I can kind of think about, I won't say what I was doing and how old I was at that time, but I remember that's how I can kind of put in relation to what I was doing at the time as to
Right.
who it was, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah, no, and I think I mentioned Jane Byrne, but because she was an important figure in that mayoral lineage. Um, but yeah, again, Chicago politics was shifting away from, I think Jane Byrne had kind of broken that. She put a dent in what they call the machine, right? And then Harold Washington really sort of upended the machine, and was able to sort of create a new era in Chicago politics. Still rough and tough. And I think there's probably still lots of shenanigans that go. I mean, we know that 5 Illinois governors have gone to prison in the last 50 years, I think, along with congressmen being indicted for various nefarious reasons, other politicians for bribery, etc. But I was going to say that not only is Chicago notorious for its electoral politics, but also for its sort of, black nationalist politics as well. And I think I was shaped by that. It's very interesting that myself and Barack Obama are the exact same age. Um, you know, he came to Chicago sort of right at the time that I was, had kind of departed from Chicago. But I 100% absolutely was shaped by that city, and I know that he was too because he talks about it, right? And he became president. I was the president of the Minneapolis City Council, and just a lot of his sensibilities around really trying to be a voice for a broad set of people, um, is sort of the mindset that I carry into politics as well. I know he considers himself to be a pragmatist. Um, I am 100% a pragmatic leader myself. I see, uh, trying to balance all the voices out there as really a big part of the job of being an elected official. Um, and yeah, and I think all of those or those three guys exemplify that kind of politics um, that was broad, that was about really helping the least of these in our society. And yeah, I'm proud to kind of come out of that tradition.
Okay, great. And now let's talk a little bit about some of those successes that you had as a councilwoman. There's also a lot of other controversies that may have come on in terms of, and I'll come back to that. So,
Hmm.
but I know this probably could have happened easily with the city council, regardless if you would have been on it or not, given that it takes a majority to still pass something. But the ban on LGBTQ, like conversion therapy, I'm
Hmm.
thinking about why that even needed to be an issue, that we have the conversion therapy, right? That there was that there had to be even be. It's unfortunate. A city council had to pass something to say we're making a ban on
Hmm.
that. And I know there's many other things that pass in the city, but I just wanted to start with that one and then some of the other issues.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's one of the things that I was really proud to have, initiated and then um, really able to see through to fruition. Nationwide, there had been this really big push to start um, directing LGBTQIA youth towards this concept called conversion therapy, which many psychiatric organizations called harmful and destructive therapies for people. Um, and it's primarily directed at young people. Um, their parents, don't like the idea that they are identifying as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and so push them into these situations to cure them of these issues. But because
So
so
called.
many medical professionals have deemed this practice harmful, we thought here in the city of Minneapolis, we don't want to see people being subjected to these harmful quasi therapeutic methods. Um, and so we were able to ban that in the city of Minneapolis. And then subsequently, the state of Minnesota um, created a ban on conversion therapy. And several other states and communities around the country have done the same thing. So, that was really a positive signal that we were able to send, I think, to the uh, LGBT community here in the Twin Cities that, you are welcome, you are valued, you are seen. And, we want to create policies that respect your right to express yourselves in your gender identity as well as sexual orientation.
Okay. I think 'cause I know that it was the ban from the state of Minnesota came in 2023 when Governor Walz was,
Laws.
well, he still is in office, but during that time. But it was also previously before the Minneapolis ban. It tried to pass and as a statewide, and it did not. It failed, and so it didn't
Hmm.
pass until after the city of Minneapolis.
After the city of Minneapolis and after you know, the Democrats had taken over the House of Representatives.
Yeah, good point.
And I think the Senate too. Yeah. The Democrats were in control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's seat. And that's when it was able to pass.
So using that as a kind of a framework, let's talk about like how important it is for people to vote in general, right? In terms of like getting out the vote, because we still have more people today. Well, I won't say more people. I don't know the statistics, but
Mhm.
there are still people who feel their voice doesn't matter. It's just one vote, and they feel we know that there's suppression happening in many different kind of forms, but some people who I have spoken to, including a cousin of mine,
Mhm.
she feels it's not worth it. So what would you say to those people who feel it's not worth voting, that their vote is not really going to matter, especially when it's marginalized voices?
Right. Well, I will say this, from a personal standpoint, my very last campaign, I ran 3 races and I won all 3 proudly. But my last one, I only won by 38 votes.
Okay.
And so every single vote mattered, right? And, the reality is that, I mentioned before in Minneapolis, we use ranked choice voting. So it mattered that, people selected me as their first on the first ballot, and then other people selected me on their second ballot. And that's how we were able to win. But, winning by a 38 vote margin means that every single vote that I got, I needed it to win, right?
Really matter.
Um, it absolutely 100% mattered. And I think that's the case in every single election that we participate in. And the reason why it's so important to vote is that at every level of government, the decisions that the people make impact your life directly. And I think the closer you are to those elected officials, the more impact they have on your life. But I can tell you right now, today, that every single decision that this president makes has a impact on our daily lives, on every American's daily lives. And um, unfortunately for us, every decision that this president makes has a negative impact on our life. Um, I haven't really came across, well, I'm not a millionaire, billionaire, or trillionaire. So maybe he made some decisions that are beneficial to those folks, but to the majority of Americans, the decisions that he has been making are detrimental to our lives. And so I think it's incredibly important from that standpoint. But the closer you are, your city council members, your county commissioners, your state representatives, like those people are making decisions that have impacts on our everyday life. Yeah, I don't even know how else to state it. I mean, so as a citizen, as a um, person living in a certain community, you want to have some say in who those people are. And it's very easy to feel like my vote doesn't matter, or they're going to do what they want to do anyway. But I can tell you, as a former elected official, when people who have participated in the process, who come to myself as an elected official with a number of other people, you got to sit down and you got to listen to those people and really take their issues and concerns into consideration as you are making decisions. And so I would say better to be engaged and involved in these processes than to let um, these public officials off the hook. It's easier to hold people accountable if you have participated in the process.
I appreciate that. So we are speaking with Andrea Jenkins, who served 8 years as city councilwoman for the city of Minneapolis. Award 8. There are so many more questions I have for you. So thank you so much for
Wow.
speaking with me this time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Sheree, thank you so much for inviting me, and look forward to continuing our conversation.
Thanks for listening today. I'm Sheree Curry, and this has been This Conversation Matters on Power 104.7, supporting the mission of the Minnesota chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists. Follow us on Instagram at NABJMN and me at Sheree Curry Media. And be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. Let's keep the conversation going.